Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. In this video, we have Nick Viall, former star of The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise, currently on Special Forces and host of the Viall Files podcast, being interviewed by Howie Mandel, a Canadian comedian, and they talk about Game of Roses. Nick says he's familiar with Game of Roses, but we have to play how this all went down. Howie kind of surprises me in this interview. I don't know if he's got a bone to pick against Nick or if he's just really good at reading Nick's energy, but he quickly picks up on this sort of like rivalry that exists in the Bachelor world. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals, patreon.com/Dave Neal for behind-the-scenes bonus content. I'll be live at 10:30 a.m. this morning, and also every afternoon, Bachelor Rush Hour, the hit podcast. We'll have all of your entertainment news rounded up in one place this afternoon. All right, so let's jump right into it. Here's a conversation between Howie and Nick. After this, I'm going to share a clip from Howie when he had Game of Roses Chad Kultgen on his podcast. And of course, if anyone wants to catch my long-form interview with Chad, we've got it over here on my Driving with Dave show, a Bachelor Nation cult. It's one of my favorite episodes. Chad and I hit it off the bat right away. It's a long-form conversation about the inner workings of Bachelor Nation. So let's take it away and hear what Howie has to say. But peep Nick's facial expression during this interview. Priceless.
Who does a podcast. He was on our podcast, and he talked about this. Dutzy, which is do you know about this? He's got an AI-driven podcast with his partner. And the partner is this genius who actually wrote a book on how to win The Bachelor.
It's
Do you know about
Bachelor
this?
Playbook, and he said
Do you know that?
I'm familiar with it.
He says, I'm familiar with it. And by the way, Chad Kultgen is a genius. He's a brilliant man. He's a great podcaster. He's an even better writer. Chad's got more talent in one fingernail than probably 99% of Bachelor Nation combined. It's hilarious that Nick's got this pedestal looking down on Chad.
The book, yeah.
You are.
And he said, let me show you what he said to us, and then I want you to comment on this.
Sorry, I have encyclopedic knowledge of reality television.
Viall
You need
Files.
to go on Nick Viall's podcast.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Why? Why?
He doesn't like you?
Stories for another time. Nick Viall is very much
What?
Wait, go.
What are you doing?
Even Nick wants them to keep playing. They paused it, and Nick's like, no, really, let's hear it. What's he going to say?
what we call a fence player. He is not affiliated legitimately with the show anymore, but he gets a lot of favors from them, so he has to kind of mind his P's and Q's about what he says. We are very definitely on the other side of that.
And by that, what he means is Nick still gets the main stars of the show as soon as they're on the show. So we've got so many people that have wanted to join our podcast, do Driving with Dave. They're just not allowed to. The first year of being on the show, you have to be pre-approved. Those approvals go to people like Caitlin Bristow, Nick Viall, and of course Bachelor Happy Hour and those other corporate podcasts. But it's a very tight-knit community of who gets the exclusives to those conversations. Because trust me when I say this, I've got everyone from Blake Moynes to Katie Bigger and everyone in between who has said they would do my show, and then when it comes down to the approval from the corporate franchise, no, crickets, no approval.
We are trying to analyze the game for what it is, a game, expose it as a game, and win that game.
Wasn't there a show that came out that was a scripted show about The Bachelor that was really showing? That's it.
Well, wait.
But
Play the clip that he...
like how productive.
What his book does, and he says that he wins.
That's a little bit before that.
That's a little bit... So you can...
Okay, so I will share what they were referencing. This is the clip they were referencing, 121:25 here. This is the clip that they were referencing where it continues what Chad actually does. So we'll get back to Nick in a second, but it's important to listen to this part.
Something that you want to plug?
I do another podcast called Game of Roses that's all about The Bachelor and reality dating games where we break it down like a sport statistically. We wrote a book called How to Win The Bachelor that a player was found reading by the producers last season, and they buried that story. But I've been coaching players to infiltrate the show for the past 3 years.
He's been coaching players.
Are you
we've
serious?
been very successful with that, yeah.
What do you mean?
That is...
Wait, before we go,
It's nuts. It's crazy.
Well, tell me what you mean. You know there is a way to win?
Yeah, we've analyzed the entire... We did a thing called the Hyper Binge, where we watched every episode from season 1 to season 25 at the time on 2 times speed.
Love this guy.
Meticulously recorded every tear, every kiss, everything you should do in a situation of a steal, group date, forced violence, group date, forced nudity, group date, whatever.
Nudity.
And we came up with essentially a mathematical theorem about how you can progress far in the show. And I've
The theorem. Oh, protect Chad.
been training players in secret to use it, and it has worked very well.
You've been training players in
Can you
secret?
tell us people who have been trained by you and how far they went?
The
No,
only
the
one that I
dude's
can
the NDA.
tell you about, I've made the deal with all the players because the producers are not happy that we're doing this.
You're like a card counter for The Bachelor.
Essentially, yeah. So I can't reveal any of the Bachelor players because they're all still under contract in one way or another. They may appear on Paradise. They may come back in successive seasons. But
And by the way, this is what Nick doesn't understand. He, in some ways, and again, I tell this to his face. He operates with a scarcity mindset. He doesn't want to ever mention Jared Freed. He doesn't want to ever mention Game of Roses, She's All Batch. He never mentions Reality Steve. He's never mentioned my name. He wants to pretend like all these other communities don't exist. If he were to have Game of Roses on his podcast, they could have a really interesting conversation. But in protecting what he believes is his, he's unwilling to, take his audience on this ride to all these other parallel programs that are out there. I guess his defense is he doesn't want to lose his audience to others. My belief is we can all share in the audience, and that's why people like Reality Steve have been so generous to me. He's willing to have me on dozens of times. He's not afraid of losing audience to me. He wants to bring good people onto his show.
But I did train to go into The Bachelor, and she wound up not doing it. Taylor Hale, who won last season of Big Brother.
Wait, you trained her how to win The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
It would have been The Bachelor.
The
She would have been The
Bachelor.
Bachelor, and she won
Big Brother.
Big Brother.
Yeah.
So do you find that the same implementation of skill sets are good for either show?
Yeah, with some variation, but yeah, reality TV generally has a kind of like similar structure regardless of what the game is, but the dating game specifically, especially Bachelor, has a very rote pattern that you can follow all the way to the end. And it's basically about manipulating the producers to get them to write you a long season arc and then kind of to manipulate them to give you a good edit as well.
And is there something you can say in short form that we can, as viewers, look at? Like,
Sure. It's all about your Instagram. From the moment you send in your application, a producer is looking at your Instagram and they are literally writing the script for who you will be in the next season when they cast you. So make sure your Instagram conveys exactly the type of character you want to be. If you want to be a villain, which I don't recommend in the modern era, make your Instagram kind of villainous. If you want to be a 4TRR, or we call it 4TR, for the right reasons player, make it that. Whatever you want to be, make your Instagram that, and they'll make you that in the show.
Genius. And look, here you have Howie Mandel so interested in this conversation because I think comedians are really good at listening. They have to listen to the audience. They have to listen to society, right? They have to be on the pulse of what's going on. So Howie's less worried about petty competitions, and he's more interested in the expertise that Chad brings. The theorem of Chad. I mean, Chad probably could be his own. And Lizzie too, by the way. This Chad's just the one here, but Lizzie, of course, equal partner, genius in the Game of Roses. Love them both.
but do you know who he is?
I've seen his face before.
Okay, it's been on that neck for years.
So Nick says, I've seen his face before. Howie calls him out and says, come on.
What I was saying, what he was saying was he wrote a book on how to win The Bachelor, and
that they've been caught on the set reading that book
And thrown off the game.
off the game.
Cast members?
Yeah.
yes,
I don't know. Maybe
play
that's true.
before that. Play before that.
So they weren't actually thrown off, but that scene was buried.
but he says there's a definite game strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I disagree with that. I mean, my understanding of these people is ultimately they're just fans of the show. Mm-hmm. They've gotten very involved. I mean, there's a competitive element to it, but I think it's what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Yeah. That my experience on the show like really affected me, you know. While I don't think I was ever really in love for what I now feel like really love is to me, I felt real pain and real sadness and real heartbreak when I was The Bachelor, even for the women I wasn't going to end up with. I felt real remorse and real guilt because on some level you have to be misleading and you have to lead people on. I tried to be very respectful for that as much as I could. And so I think, and everyone's experience is different. The people who make it to the Final Four, they have a very different experience on that show rather than the people who are there for night one or a couple weeks. I always find it kind of hilarious that the people who usually go home the first week or two have the most to say about how the show works in public.
So anyway, Nick does a really good job of taking the light off of Game of Roses and making it about himself. He's very political.
It's going to be on Dave Neal, by the way.
So it's like that clip I have right here where the girl goes, I think it was Becca Moore, she goes, this is going to be on Dave Neal, and Nick just barrels through it.
This is going to be on Dave Neal, by the way. Dave Neal's making a clip of it.
But it's, the people who make the Final Four are literally there twice as long.
How long is the whole thing?
Depending on the season, but historically, typically it's about 9 weeks. And you get to the Final Four within the first 5.5, 6 weeks. So again, the Final Four, they're almost twice as long as anyone else. But I guess my point is like, listen, they're having fun. I think they're kind of, my question for them is I wonder how serious they are about their analysis of the show. But to me, again, like the people who go on that show, it was my life for a big part of my 30s, and I had a lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of trauma from it and a lot of experiences, and to have that be suggested that it's all just a game and it's all fake and no one's sincere and it's all just gamesmanship, I think is disingenuous to the people who've had real feelings and real emotions and had to deal with some real trauma from that environment.
But they don't know.
Nick's conflating their gamesmanship as being disingenuous. I think they're different conversations. They've basically, so we've talked about this before. There's qualitative measurement and quantitative, right? They've taken qualitative measurement, which could be just like watching the show and feeling heartbreak and feeling love, and they've broken it down into quantitative by measuring the different types of dates, the different scenarios, the first impression rows. So they've gamified a show that is built on the quality, not the quantity. Does this make sense? Am I making any sense here? So it's not disingenuous what they're doing. They've just created a theorem, like they said, to quote unquote win the show. That doesn't mean win the show and screw over the lead and you're just there for fame. It just takes into the reality, which is that there is a sort of a method that produces the winners.
Know that going into it, and I think most people probably go into it for the reasons that you went into it, because
Exactly.
It would be a great experience, and lo and behold, I can end up with a great life partner. I would think the hardest part on that show is the Bachelor or the Bachelorette, and I would think it would be.
Well, yeah, it feels impossible.
But what I'm saying is to
Agreed.
disappoint somebody, to have to face somebody and say you aren't getting the rose.
Yeah, because when you're the one getting dumped, you're the victim of the dumping. Everyone's going to love you. When you're the one doing the dumping, as we're watching Gary and it plays out on Golden Bachelor, it's heartbreaking. Gary's a full-grown man. He's 72 years young, 73, right? And he's having a hard time dumping people because he understands the levity that exists there. Absolutely.
Or you're going home, or it's not you. I don't know that I could do that. It was really hard for me, even on Deal or No Deal, where or even on AGT, to give somebody some negative news that I didn't love it, or I don't. That's always the hardest thing, and I don't know how I imagine it's really hard for these people to receive rejection so publicly with cameras and everybody around, but to constantly. How many do you start out with on how many people start
25 to 30.
All right, so then he goes, and Nick's breathing loudly and clearly shows that, I don't know, maybe he does enjoy it. Maybe this is just the audio picking it up. But whenever we see arguments that seem to be one person versus the other, in this case, Nick not respecting and appreciating what Game of Roses does, I like to come in as the middle child here and just go, hold on a second. Just because Chad has found this niche doesn't negate that he's a genius with what he's done. They've published a book about it, and they did it all without the blessings of the Bachelor corporate gods that give you 1 million followers. So it's almost twisted. It's almost that Nick doesn't respect, and let me know if I'm wrong here. There are very few people that are content creators in the Bachelor world that Nick will have on. There are celebrities like Jim Jeffries and those, but those aren't a threat to him, right? Those aren't the everyday content creators. It's almost like Nick doesn't respect the content creators that are his peers because they didn't do it through the show, and maybe they don't have the same shared experience he has. But honestly, I respect the independent content creators even more, because no offense to the Rachel Lindsays, who are fantastic, no offense to Becca Kufrins, who I love, no offense to Blake Horstman, who can become a DJ from going on the show and all that, but I really respect the She's All Batches. I really respect Steve Carbone. I really respect Jess Ambrose. I mean, there's so many different people I could get into. Who did I miss? That are doing fantastic work, and they built it because the audience wanted it. They built it from the ground up, and I think that's worth celebrating. I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave a comment. We'll be back on Patreon right after this.